La session d'aujourd'hui, c'est vraiment de faire suite à vraiment tout ce qui s'est passé depuis le premier sommet qu'on a tenu à Woodstock l'an dernier. Donc, on va faire un peu une mise à jour de ce qui s'est fait depuis. Et puis, on va parler beaucoup de collaboration aujourd'hui, donc un peu maximiser le plus possible la collaboration qu'on peut mener entre nous. So today is really about collaboration and exchanging ideas and giving feedback. And I think the people in the room are the good people in the room to share those insights.
Puis, pour s'assurer qu'on n'a pas seulement que vous, chères personnes très engagées, très intelligentes, très informées sur le sujet, on est aussi présent sur les médias sociaux. Vous allez vous rendre compte qu'on a des caméras dans la salle, des gens qui se promènent et qui filment. Les parties qui sont diffusées en direct. Le live stream, c'est vraiment les présentations des représentants gouvernementaux, puis probablement de nous tout de suite. Chouba, on est-tu là? Allô, maman? Non? Ça fait longtemps que je le fais, ça. C'est notre 8e sommet. Là. Ça fait un bout de temps que je le dire allô à ma mère. Vous allez m'excuser. C'est lundi matin. S'il vous plaît. Très présent aussi directement sur les médias sociaux. Vous allez voir qu'on a un mot-clic, un hashtag. In English, we have OpenGovNB. En français, on a J'ai ouvert NB. So, if you are tweeting from this event, if you are on Facebook, we would like you to use our hashtag so that people can enter in the conversation, ask questions if they're home or at work and they can't be here with us today. That's the objective that we have, is to get more people involved in the conversation. Donc, notre identifiant, je cherchais le mot en français pour notre handle, Twitter, et en français, GNB vous répond, en anglais, GNB replies. Si vous voulez vous joindre à la conversation, on a aussi un site web. Vous allez voir que c'est possible à un moment donné que nos amis qui sont aux caméras, Yvar et Marie, vont circuler, vont prendre des images, mais ils ne vont pas enregistrer l'audio à la table. Donc, c'est simplement pour avoir des images, parce qu'après les sommets, on est en train, puis on va en sortir plusieurs dans les prochains jours, on fait un petit résumé vidéo de ce qui s'est passé. Qu'est-ce qui est l'essence des discussions qu'on a eues? Donc, soyez pas gênés, ils ne vont pas prendre de son de ce que vous dites sans avoir votre permission, mais c'est très possible qu'il y ait des gens dans la salle à qui on va demander de participer à notre effort de communication en fin de journée. Je veux aussi vous présenter mon ami Félix, qui est en arrière, qui s'occupe des médias sociaux. C'est l'équipe de communication avec laquelle on travaille aujourd'hui. We would also like to acknowledge that the land on which we gather is the traditional unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This territory is covered by the treaties of peace and friendship, which the Wolastoqey, Mi'kmaq, and Passamaquoddy people first signed with the British Crown in 1725. The treaties did not deal with the surrender of the lands and resources, but in fact recognized Mi'kmaq title and established rule for what was to be an ongoing relationship between nations. We recognize this and thank the First People for the opportunity to host this summit here today. Sans plus attendre, nous voudrions inviter Madame le maire de Moncton, Dawn Arnold, à vous adresser la parole.
Merci beaucoup, Pascal et Jason. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi d'être parmi vous ce matin au nom du conseil municipal et tous les citoyennes et citoyens de Moncton. C'est une conversation importante and it's something that I think about a lot, I have to say. I sit at a lot of tables where I am the only woman. Far too many. Because I think our whole society is diminished when we don't have women's voices around decision-making tables. And it's one of the biggest reasons that inspired me to run for City Council 5 years ago. I also believe, and I say this all the time, but my mantra is, change the game, don't let the game change you. And I think that that is vital to gender equality. We have to, sometimes the rules of the game are broken and they need to be reevaluated. And I'm going to put a plug in for something that I feel very passionately about, and that is middle school girls. I think that's where we need to be spending much more focus and real concerted efforts to educate them and to empower them. Because something happens in middle school. I'm not sure what it is. Mais comme exemple, en politique, ici à la ville de Moncton, nous sommes 11, mais nous sommes juste 3 femmes. Ça, c'est 27%. Et ce n'est pas assez. I also wanted to pass along my sympathies to the friends and family of Wendy Robbins. I didn't know Wendy, but it sounds like she was quite a trailblazer when it comes to gender equality. So she will be lost in her presence will be a really big loss for our community. So congratulations to the organizers. Thank you for putting this on. This is an important discussion. I hope you have a really great summit. I am now supposed to welcome my friend and Minister of Finance, Kathy Rogers, but she's running a little late, so I'm going to introduce my another good friend, Susan Holt. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Dawn. And I should say Minister Rogers isn't running late. It was a communication error on our part of telling her when to be here. So she is perfectly on time with the information she was given. We gave her the wrong information. So I'll take responsibility for that, because the minister is not only a punctual woman, usually she's early. So we're going to switch things up a little bit. My name is Susan Holt. I'm the Chief of Business Relationships with the Jobs Board Secretariat, part of the Executive Council Office for the Government of New Brunswick. Mouthful. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about what we're going to do today and why we're doing it, as well as ask each of you to introduce yourselves so that you all know who's in the room and who you're going to be working with today, and then set things up so that when the minister arrives, she can tell you about the state of the economy today, the situation that New Brunswick's in, and a little bit about the work that the department's doing before Jocelyn dives in with the real sort of detailed information about everything that's happened since we first started doing these. So I'm going to say a little piece. I'm going to do a massive flip through the slides, I think, so you'll get a sneak preview of what Minister Rogers was going to speak about, and then in. So we did this round of summits. I think the Women's Equality Branch hosted one of the very first summits in October of 2015. That was one of 22 that we held through 2015 and into 2016. So we were doing those to help us build the economic growth plan for New Brunswick. We were capturing ideas for where growth opportunities were going to come from. We were capturing different pieces of information about what conditions were required for economic growth. And after we gathered all of those pieces of input up, we developed the growth plan that we launched in September of 2016. And that growth plan proposed a slightly new model of economic development. So that's what's described on the screen here. You'll see these 3 different pieces of economic development that we've proposed government model itself around. You would probably be most familiar with the gray circle, at least those of us in the economic development space. The gray circle, business development, is what we've done for a lot of years. Some of you might remember Economic Development and Tourism, ED&T, or then Business New Brunswick, or Invest New Brunswick, or now Opportunities New Brunswick. That's the arm of government that works with firms to help firms grow, to attract firms here, to do that one-on-one firm-level economic development. So we've been doing that in New Brunswick for ages. And we thought we would get better economic results if we paired business development effort with policy development effort and community development effort. And if those 3 things were all happening around the same concerted opportunities, we felt we would get better economic results. More people engaged, better wages, a further diversification of economic benefit across the economy. So that was the model that we proposed in the growth plan. We also took it a step further to identify specific opportunities for growth. So we listened at these 22 summits, and we heard members of nonprofit communities, members of industry and others tell us where they thought growth was going to come from in the future, and we made some choices. So we heard a lot of things, and we obviously didn't pick all of them. The ones you'll see on the slides here were the ones that stood out for us, where we thought New Brunswick had a legitimate competitive advantage, where we saw global growth in the marketplace, and we thought if we connect business development, policy development, and community development around those things, we will get better results. So the minister will talk about some of these as well, so I'll just go quickly too. We then took the conditions for growth that we heard from these summits and identified the 5 that we thought government could address from that policy angle. So business development is working with firms and helping them grow. Policy development, we wanted to orient around this landscape of people. Do we have the right people? Do those people have the right knowledge? Is the conditions there for them to gain that knowledge? What does our educational environment look like? What does the environment for women look like? How do our laws and our policies create the opportunity for the right people to engage in the economy? And that's a condition for growth we're going to develop generally, as well as against those 15 economic growth opportunities. And then we went from there. So if you have people, do they have ideas? Are we commercializing new knowledge in a way that benefits society and the economy? Do those people with ideas have access to the capital they need to make a difference? And do those people with ideas who have a bit of money in their pocket have access to the infrastructure they need to reach their customer through the internet, on a plane, on a bridge, with a trade relationship? So do we have the infrastructure in place? And then is government there facilitating in a nimble way? Are we being agile, or is our regulatory environment and our legislative environment creating undue burden that makes it harder for people from New Brunswick to engage successfully in the economy that is now clearly global? So we mapped out those conditions for growth, and the growth plan proposes those. If you have read it, you will see, and I think Jocelyn will talk a little bit more about this, that there were specific actions related to increasing women's participation in the economy as entrepreneurs and as employees in that people section. So that's where some of the feedback from that first summit came out. So that was Summit 1. Now I call it Summit 1. The Women's Equality Branch has done a fantastic job engaging with their stakeholders repeatedly since October. That's unusual. Most of our departments held that summit and then went back to the business of government and are coming back a second time through this round. But the Women's Equality Branch has led numerous engagements with their stakeholders and partners since. So I'll call it this summit as opposed to Summit 2. But that first summit for us was all about participation, hearing the ideas, engaging participants. Today is about accountability and transparency. Today is the time where we want to report back to you to say, here's what's been done. Here are the efforts that have been made, the choices made. Here's what we haven't done since those ideas were gathered. So really it is our chance to say whether we've acted upon or not what we heard from everyone who engaged with us through the first round. So that's why we're calling it the transparency round. The goal is to get to a real open government model of collaboration. So first we invite participation, then we're transparent and accountable about what we heard and what we're doing. And ideally, by the time we're here next year, we will have collaborated, and it won't be me presenting, it will be you presenting the pieces that you've done, how you've contributed to the whole, which piece government's had a part of. But people will be working together more tightly on what I hope is clearly shared priorities. So that's the goal. That's partly why all of the videos and the hashtagging. Ça, c'est pourquoi on veut être ici avec tout le monde qui est intéressé, ceux dans la salle, ceux qui sont à la maison ou qui ne peuvent pas être ici aujourd'hui. Alors, je pense que ça, c'est tout ce que je voulais présenter. Je vous demande peut-être à ce moment de vous introduire. Alors, si vous pouvez vous lever, nous dire votre nom, puis votre organisation, pour qu'on peut se rendre un petit peu plus familier. Seth, on va commencer avec toi.
Seth Asamakis with the Community Loan Fund in St. John.
Christine Alain avec le St. John Community Loan Fund aussi. Anne-Marie Laroche, ici, Université de Moncton, département de génie civil et aussi Association des ingénieurs et géoscientifiques du Nouveau-Brunswick.
Émilie Arsenault avec Assomption Vie.
Nicole Béliveau avec Assomption Vie.
Bonjour, hello. Kim Wilson with Atlantic Lottery.
Hi, everyone. I'm Katie Davey. I'm the Special Advisor for Policy in the Premier's Office.
Hello, I'm Beth Lyons. I'm with the New Brunswick Women's Council.
Valerie Stearns-Anderson, I'm the chair of the New Brunswick Coalition for Pay Equity. Je suis Valerie Stearns-Anderson, présidente de la Coalition pour l'équité salariale.
I got a cold, so I apologize. My name is Luc. I'm the new executive director for the Chartered Professional in Human Resource of New Brunswick.
Hello, everyone. Fernand Ouellet, Energy and B-Power.
Carol O'Reilly, CEO of the Greater Moncton Chamber of Commerce, directrice générale de la Chambre de commerce de Grand Moncton.
Bonjour, je suis Lynne Chantal Boudreau. Je suis professeure en administration de l'éducation ici au campus de Moncton et je porte un second chapeau aussi aujourd'hui. Je suis propriétaire de la compagnie Bibiline Design qui vise à contrer la violence familiale et conjugale.
Joanne Perron, directrice générale de la Coalition pour l'équité salariale du Nouveau-Brunswick, Executive Director for the New Brunswick Coalition for Pay Equity.
Madeleine Delaney-Leblanc, je fais partie de plusieurs organisations comme la Coalition pour l'équité salariale, le Réseau féministe du Nouveau-Brunswick, Fondation Marichette et toutes sortes d'autres choses.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Jewel Mitchell, and I'm the Executive Director of the YWCA, both here in Moncton and in St. John.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Amanda Hashi, Director of New Lab, New Brunswick Social and Public Innovation Lab.
Oh, hey, a lot of friendly faces. Heather Robinson from Rogers Communications. And I just want to say, Mayor Arnold spoke about Wendy Robbins. Wendy was going to be joining us today, so let's all do this work on her behalf. Thank you.
Nicole Cochran, Rogers Communications.
Bonjour, Vicky Martin, je suis en ressources humaines ici à l'Université de Moncton.
Hi, I'm Gordon Myhan. I'm the Public Engagement and Marketing Coordinator for the New Brunswick Multicultural Council.
Bonjour, je suis Jaël Duarte. Je travaille aussi avec le Conseil multiculturel du Nouveau-Brunswick, particulièrement dans un projet par rapport aux femmes migrantes.
Bonjour, je suis Isabelle Mecky-Alain. Mon ancienne carrière, j'ai été doyenne de faculté pendant 15 ans ici à l'Université de Moncton. J'ai enseigné à plusieurs des gens qui sont ici aujourd'hui. Comme prof de sociologie, j'enseignais entre autres le cours Sociologie de la condition des femmes. Mais aujourd'hui, mon chapeau, c'est vice-présidente francophone de la Coalition pour l'équité salariale.
Good morning, Miguel LeBlanc. I'm the Executive Director of the New Brunswick Association of Social Workers, but I'm also the Chair of their Meryl McQueen Family Violence Research Center.
Nelly Denaine, je suis la directrice générale du regroupement féministe du Nouveau-Brunswick.
Bonjour, moi c'est Madeleine Arsenault, je suis directrice générale adjointe à la Fédération des jeunes francophones du Nouveau-Brunswick.
Good morning, Bernard LeBlanc, président CEO Greater Moncton Romeo LeBlanc International Airport, aéroport international Romeo LeBlanc du Grand Moncton.
OK, excellent. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. C'est un gros plaisir de vous avoir ici. Et maintenant, c'est mon plaisir d'introduire quelqu'un qui m'inspire à la possibilité des femmes en politique et beaucoup plus d'autres choses. C'est notre ministre responsable du finance, puis aussi de la littératie. Et ici pour le riding de Moncton Sud. Merci beaucoup. Alors, tout le monde, si vous voulez me joindre, à donner du bienvenue à Kathy Rogers.
Thank you, Susan. Merci. Et merci tout le monde pour être ici ce matin. C'est un grand plaisir pour moi, comme d'habitude. Et j'ai aussi beaucoup de chapeaux comme sociologue, puis aussi le ministre des Finances et a minor piece. No, I'm just kidding. I know I missed the first part of this morning. I was at two other meetings. I want to thank Susan for the introduction and say good morning to everyone. But before I say a couple of words, it was my intention, or I thought I was speaking early. I have had a very recent conversation with Wendy Robbins before she took ill. And like many of you in this room, I was totally shocked and saddened, still in that state, to learn what has happened. And I know she planned to be here today. And we were jointly working on 2 or 3 initiatives. One, the very night of a dinner we were at when she took ill the next, just later. And we were going to follow up this week on it. And so I agree. Thank you, Heather. In her name, let's take a moment's silence. Thank you so much, merci. And I know anything we do to help women's equality, she will be rejoicing. So, en tout cas, Encore, je vous remercie d'être ici aujourd'hui pour un 12e sommet portant sur l'égalité des genres au Nouveau-Brunswick. C'est beau de se retrouver dans une salle pleine de personnes du Nouveau-Brunswick qui travaillent fort afin de faire progresser l'égalité des femmes dans la province. Comme sociologue, j'étais professeur aussi, and I taught both gender studies, or actually 3, gender studies, women's studies, and sociology of women. So we had lots of opportunities to take different perspectives on what are the barriers and what is still keeping women low. So I'm happy to bring this and experience here. Last year, as Susan said, government hosted the first round of these summits to identify new prospects for creating job growth in the province. And with your support, we are seeing positive change, and we are getting things done. I believe we are. Today, we'll share with you some of the actions taken since, develop together some future plans, and gather your input, and gather new opportunities to consider for the future. So I want to just share a little bit for a moment about the state of the economy today. We know that our economy does have its share of ups and downs. Since the 2008 recession, however, our economy, has remained pretty sluggish. Annual private sector capital investment is down by an average of $900 million per year. This is not easy compared to a decade ago. And the total number of people active in the labor force across the province, we know, is also shrinking. So we're all part of, and I'm sure playing strong roles in our neighborhoods and backyards, trying to work on some of these initiatives that Susan had on the board before, of investment in people, growing our population. Notre gouvernement sait ce qui compte pour les gens du Nouveau-Brunswick. Nous savons à quel point il importe de créer des emplois, d'assurer la croissance économique et de protéger et d'améliorer les soins de santé et l'éducation. En travaillant ensemble, nous avons réussi à créer des emplois. De plus, nous avons commencé à observer des tendances économiques favorables ainsi que des récents succès qui positionneront la province en vue d'une plus grande croissance économique. For example, while it's been sluggish since 2008, in 2015, the GDP in New Brunswick increased by 2.3%, which is the largest annual GDP growth in New Brunswick since 2004. This is also the third best economic growth in the country, so we're doing something. This growth is expected to continue in 2016. In fact, we expect GDP growth of more than 3.3% between 2015 and 2017. Of course, you're thinking this is 2017. What do you mean? Well, it's reported in behind times. This is more than triple the growth rate between 2007 and 2014. Also good to say that capital expenditures have rebounded from a 3-decade low point in 2013 and 14. And in 2015-16, we witnessed the largest number of immigrants to the province in history. And we know these are all real successes that we can be proud of. However, there's still a lot of work to do. Le gouvernement joue un rôle important dans la création des conditions favorables à la croissance économique dans la province. Une croissance économique positive nous est tout profitable car elle égalise les marchés locaux et augmente le nombre d'emplois disponibles pour les personnes ici chez elles. As well, a growing economy will naturally generate the increases in tax revenue needed to sustainably fund the public services and infrastructure that every one of us not only use every day, but come to depend on. Government has been working hard continuously to create opportunities for growth across the province. However, ensuring continued economic growth and prosperity is a difficult one, and one that we know government cannot do alone. As I mentioned earlier, last year government hosted, or as Susan mentioned, government hosted a series of economic opportunity summits with New Brunswickers. And here we were very pleased to be able to engage youth, entrepreneurs, academia, community, business, Aboriginal leaders. We were trying to get, and we met by individual sector as well, and we were trying to get people's ideas and thoughts on the challenges and opportunities before us. Nous avons entendu plus de 1200 personnes durant la première série de sommets. Les commentaires, les opinions et les idées des participants au sommet nous ont aidés à formuler le plan croissance économique du Nouveau-Brunswick. This plan forms the vision and is based on the 5 pillars that I'm not going to repeat, that Susan did put before you, but it's investing in our people, infrastructure, being as agile as possible, fostering innovation, and also helping access to capital. So this economic growth plan identifies opportunities as well where we can see real potential for GDP growth and job creation in the province. It includes specific opportunities that we've identified from hearing from New Brunswickers, like maple syrup, blueberries, cannabis, local food and beverage promotion, sis and mine, more farmers being able to carry on their business in the province. It also includes knowledge-based opportunities like business services, financial back office, cybersecurity, in order for us to maximize our specific expertise in New Brunswick, that we can find leadership roles to play, not just in a region, in a country, but globally. For each of these opportunities, we've got teams working with industries and supporting them to help strengthen their networks and value propositions that help them to add value on what they're doing, so that we can also foster greater investment and greater growth opportunity. So we need our economic development efforts, obviously, to focus on where we can find some competitive advantages. We want our partners in every region of the province to look at ways we can leverage these and make our New Brunswick attributes very attractive to other communities. So we believe that this approach is doable, it's durable, and it's one that will serve us in the years to come. So why are we here today? L'important sommet qui se déroule aujourd'hui vise à assurer que les Néo-Brunswickois, dans toute leur diversité, ont la possibilité de s'épanouir dans la province afin de contribuer à faire croître économique et à profiter de celui-ci. En tant que première femme ministre des Finances au Nouveau-Brunswick, je préfère première sociologue, ministre des Finances, je suis fière des initiatives et des mesures que votre gouvernement a prises pour favoriser l'égalité des femmes. Government has made some great strides in advancing gender equality, and I'll just name some of these. We're using gender-based analyses in policy decisions. We're increasing the number of women on government agencies, boards, and commissions. In fact, this is going very, very well. We're furthering pay equity in the public sector, and I am so pleased to celebrate with every group that gets advanced with pay equity. I've been, I think, a member of the Pay Equity Coalition since it coalitioned. We're making tools available for assisting organizations in being more gender diverse, such as the recently released Atlantic Guide to Gender Diversity in Employment. We're promoting gender-neutral names for position titles across government, with amendments to legislation to change the names of rentalsmen and ombudsmen, for example. Even if we're made fun of doing it, we're doing it. And we're also, I'm so proud to say, introducing the intimate Partner Violence Intervention Act to provide victims of intimate partner violence with additional tools to increase their safety while they seek more permanent solutions. This is actually going to enable us to take emergency court orders and take action immediately with the victims and protect them and their families. Throughout my whole career with my many different hats, I've spoken with women from all over New Brunswick, and they have shared with me their thoughts and concerns regarding the importance of advancing women's equality. Votre gouvernement comprend que pour parvenir à une économie prospère, il est essentiel d'instaurer un climat de recrutement et de gestion des talents qui offre à chaque personne, sans égard au genre, la possibilité de réaliser son plein potentiel et d'apporter une contribution productive à l'économie. Notre gouvernement s'est engagé à faire sa part en tant que l'employeur. Il reste sans aucun doute des améliorations à apporter, mais nous sommes déterminés à atteindre l'objectif de l'égalité entre les genres et de la diversité dans notre milieu de travail. Nous voulons également collaborer avec vous afin d'appuyer et de souligner les efforts que vous déployez à l'égard de la diversité des genres dans vos propres milieux de travail et dans l'ensemble de la province. So we are listening to New Brunswickers, and we will continue to focus on advancing women's equality through efforts to improve pay equity going forward, reducing the gender wage gap, and ensuring women in this province, in all of their diversity, are able to live free of violence. Together, I know we can advance women's equality in New Brunswick. By the way, I was at a meeting last week where there were 31 people in the room. I was one woman. So we have a long ways to go. Once again, we know government has an important role to play, but we also need input from you in industry, stakeholders, and from all New Brunswickers in helping us pursue growth opportunities. Attending this summit is one important way for all of us to engage and to share our thoughts and ideas on how we can best move forward, because we all come from different perspectives, so it's very important we hear each other. So I want to just close by thanking you all for being here, and I look forward to some of the discussions that you're going to be having today. I will pay very close attention, trust me, and I will continue to be a strong voice with you in this area. And I'm not sure who's coming up next, because I know we're out of order. Mais merci beaucoup.
Merci, Madame la Ministre. I'll take care of the next steps. Thank you so much for that great information. Je vais maintenant présenter Assistant Deputy Minister de la Direction de l'égalité des femmes, Madame Jocelyn Mills, à nous donner un portrait de ce qui a été fait dans la dernière année. Madame Mills.
Merci beaucoup. Est-ce que vous m'entendez? Okay. C'est vraiment un plaisir pour moi d'être parmi vous aujourd'hui. Je suis, comme on l'a dit, la sous-ministre adjointe avec la Direction de l'égalité des femmes au Nouveau-Brunswick. Je vais faire la majorité de mes remarques en anglais aujourd'hui. Mes excuses aux francophones dans la salle. Je suis le produit d'une union d'une ardente acadienne et d'un gars de Boys Town qui est devenu un francophile. Puis des fois, mon cerveau fonctionne dans une des deux langues. Puis quand je faisais mes notes en fin de semaine, c'était l'anglais qui dominait. Mais je suis certainement, quand vous avez des questions, n'hésitez pas dans aucune langue. Je suis vraiment, vraiment contente d'être ici avec vous aujourd'hui. Pas juste pour discuter de la question de l'égalité des genres, mais c'est la synergie entre cette question très importante et le développement économique de notre province. Je tiens les deux très à cœur. Moi, j'ai fait carrière au gouvernement. J'ai commencé ma carrière dans le domaine du développement économique. Et puis, je suis très contente de voir l'importance qu'on accorde au fait que notre économie ne va pas progresser pleinement tant et avant qu'on ait l'égalité pleine des genres dans cette province. So I'm really excited about the discussions today. I'm going to share the airtime today too with my wonderful colleague Beth Lyons from the New Brunswick Women's Council, who's going to talk a little bit about some work that's happened over the last little while in terms of Social Innovation Lab on gender equality. So there'll be a little bit of a break, a little bit of jumping around from me to Beth and then back to me. I also want to talk just a little bit about the work of our branch in moving the province forward as it pertains to advancing women's equality. Our branch and our primary mandate is really to coordinate government action in advancing women's equality. And that can take many forms, and therefore there are many areas of focus to the work that is done by the wonderful staff that I get to work with on a daily basis, including work in the areas of violence prevention, access to opportunity, and wage gap reduction. Our vision at the branch is equality for all women, and we pursue this through three key goals: equitable wages, safety for all women, and ending gender bias and stereotypes. As part of the province's economic growth plan, as Susan mentioned earlier in her remarks, there was a commitment to improving economic opportunities for women. Ensuring that the women of the province are able to contribute fully to economic growth and have the opportunity to participate fully in economic activity is an area of key concern for the government. And as we heard Minister Rogers speak to as well, this is very important. And it's important both because it's the socially responsible thing to do, but also because it makes good economic sense and good business sense. So in terms of opportunities for advancing women's equality, we've been working to both engage and to act. And so to talk a little bit about, I know this seems like quite a bit of information, but it's kind of to demonstrate the two parallel tracks that at the branch we've been focused on in the last little while. Part of our objective is to build partnerships and collaborative opportunities to advance women's equality within the province. We recognize that government has work to do in areas that are within its control, but we also recognize that many levers exist within the non-government sector. So we really want to ensure that we hear the needs of the private sector, of employers, employees, and not-for-profit organizations to ensure that we address barriers and capitalize on opportunities. So the timelines on the slide that you have in front of you here really address the work that our branch has been leading within government to reach these parallel objectives of engaging and acting. So on the engagement front, there was the first summit around the Economic Opportunities Summit, which was held in Woodstock in September 2015, and I know a number of you that are with us today were there with us as well. And as part of that, we had the What We Heard report that came out of that. That was shared with the participants, and it's also available on the government website with the rest of the information from all of the Economic Opportunities Summits. We then, from there, wanted to kind of capitalize on the momentum that we felt was created in Woodstock, and we held a second session in Moncton in the spring of 2016 to kind of try to crystallize some of the opportunities that had been identified and see how we could better work collaboratively. And actually, that was really the genesis for the Social Innovation Lab work and the idea of pursuing that model that Beth will speak to you about in more detail in a moment. And then there was the launch of the Economic Growth Plan, which we've mentioned really contained some specific actions in terms of economic opportunities for women. And that's really, as I said, I've started my career in economic development, and to have that sort of very deliberate approach embedded within an economic growth plan that really paid attention to opportunities for women is quite unique in my experience anyway with government. And I think it's really something to be celebrated and proud of. From there, the Innovation Lab was launched. And we've also had further engagements in the context of the family plan. And so Susan talked about the concentric circles around the economic growth plan, but there's also the concentric circles around sort of the three key pillars of government activity: the education plan, the economic growth plan, and the family plan. And so certainly we recognize that not everything with respect to gender equality has to do with economics, or just the social sphere, or just education, but it's really all of those pillars working together. And so we did have, in the context of the family plan, which is still being articulated and reflecting on the consultations that were had in that context, a lot of really good feedback that I think you will see reflected in the family plan as it evolves. So that's sort of been on the engagement front. And in terms of action, I won't go through that one in as much detail, because I think the minister did a really great job around talking about some of the key activities that government, or the key deliverables that government has provided in the last little while. Just briefly on what we heard, I think through all those various engagement sessions, there have been some recurring themes that have come back that we've heard from you. And maybe just to bring those back, really a lot of focus on continuing to improve the economic security of women through providing things such as access to childcare, elder care, educational opportunities in non-traditional careers, and pay equity. We've heard a lot about focusing on workplace-based initiatives to increase gender equality, so things such as leadership, mentorship, diversity in recruitment, and policies to support those objectives. We heard a lot about the need to increase personal safety of women through initiatives to reduce violence in New Brunswick's communities and workplaces. We've heard about the need for increased education and awareness efforts, which serve to diminish gender biases and create awareness around unacceptable behaviors. And finally, through it all, there was this theme of how government and the non-government sector can really better work together to address these issues. So I think if you look at the work that's happened on the engagement front and those key deliverables that are up here, and Minister Rogers talked about a few, I think we're starting to get at some of those same themes. You can see that there's that synergy between the actions that government has taken and those themes that we've been hearing in our engagement sessions. So part of our goal today with this presentation is going to be provide you with some of the key facts and information that can help nourish the discussion that we want to get at today and that we'll soon be engaging in. And part of that is really including how we can better work together. And so to kind of start us off on that, I'm going to invite Beth Lyons from the New Brunswick, the Executive Director with the New Brunswick Women's Council, to talk a little bit about one model for collaboration, which is the Social Innovation Lab, and to give us a little bit more about that. So turn it over to you, Beth.
Excellent. Bonjour tout le monde. Comme Jocelyne a dit, je suis la directrice générale du Conseil des femmes du Nouveau-Brunswick. On a quelques membres du Conseil dans la salle aujourd'hui. On a Lynn Chantal Boutreau, qui représente le regroupement féministe du Nouveau-Brunswick, et Nelly, qui travaille avec le regroupement féministe du Nouveau-Brunswick, Jules Mitchell avec YWCA Moncton, Joanne Perron et beaucoup d'autres personnes qui viennent du Coalition pour l'équité salariale aussi. Alors, bonjour à les membres du Conseil. Les laboratoires sociaux d'innovation publique. C'est une méthode de faire le travail sur les enjeux qui sont complexes. Et complexe veut dire quelque chose assez précis. C'est un problème qu'on ne peut pas même arriver à un accord sur c'est quoi le problème. On ne peut pas même définir le problème parce que c'est tellement complexe que peut-être je regarde d'un point de vue puis je pense ceci est le problème. Quelqu'un d'autre regarde d'un autre point de vue puis pense non, c'est pas ça le problème, c'est quelque chose d'autre. C'est pas la même chose qu'un problème technique, qui est un problème où on peut assembler les personnes qui ont l'expertise sur l'enjeu, puis faire le travail et régler le problème. C'est quelque chose où on vraiment faut collaborer avec les personnes qui vivent le problème. Alors, au Nouveau-Brunswick, on est chanceuse d'avoir un programme New Lab, puis Amanda Haché est la directrice de New Lab. Puis le Conseil des femmes a fait partie d'un groupe qui a participé dans la dernière session de New Lab. Puis, ce n'était pas juste moi-même, parce que c'est un processus collaboratif. On avait aussi Nelly Deneen, encore du regroupement féministe, qui était là. Puis, on avait aussi le groupe que Jocelyne travaille avec, la branche, la direction l'égalité des femmes. Puis, on avait aussi des représentants de l'alcool Nouveau-Brunswick et le Fredericton Sexual Assault Crisis Center. Puis, je pense que j'ai tout. Oui, j'ai tout. Alors, ce qui est... Je voulais aussi dire... puis New Lab, c'est quelque chose qui a été créé par le Pondish Bonday Center et le New Brunswick Social Policy Research Network. I did not know that name in French offhand. SPRIN, on le dit. OK. Puis ceci, c'est vraiment la méthodologie qu'on utilise avec les social labs. Social labs, the way that I kind of fell in love with the idea of them is they're about not doing business as usual. We have a way that we typically engage with problems, which is that we treat them like we can plan them, like we can predict outcomes, we can approach them, we can figure out what to do, we can deliver on that, and then we report on outcomes. With complex problems, that doesn't work because complex problems are often part of complex systems. And some of the things that we see in complex systems is that they're emergent. So we're just figuring out how they work. They're adaptive, so they're constantly changing, and they're very info-rich. So there's an incredible amount of information that can be read about these systems. And those three things together often result in what I heard referred to as analysis paralysis. There's just so much information, we can't get a full hold on every single aspect of it, so we kind of get frozen in wanting to learn about it instead of taking action on it, or we want to plan. We want to plan to death, and we want to leave the trying things until the very end of it. So labs are about taking a slightly different approach. What we do is we gather multi-stakeholder teams, we apply systems thinking, and then we prototype and test solutions. And I think depending on what sector you're in, different parts of these are going to seem really natural to you. I come from a long time in the nonprofit sector, so for me, the gathering multi-stakeholder teams and systems thinking made a lot of sense, but prototyping scared the hell out of me, to be perfectly honest. So because Jocelyn wanted to put an emphasis on collaboration, I want to speak a little bit more about that. So one of the things that we do that we might not want to admit about ourselves is that we sometimes look at complicated problems and we get together in a room with people and people do not agree with us. They see the issue from a different perspective and we want to kick them out of the room so that we now have a technical problem that we just need our experts and we can tell you exactly how to fix it. We have a technical problem instead of a complex one. Social labs force us to not kick people out of the room. You still get to decide, making sure you have the right people in the room. There might be people who aren't the right fit for it, but it's about gathering a multidisciplinary, multi-stakeholder team. And really importantly, it has to reflect the people who are living the problem. And this is something that anyone who's doing work on women's equality knows is particularly important. We've all seen those all-male panels talking about abortion access or about women in the workforce. Bless those often older white men who are having these important discussions and there's not a woman up on the panel. So that's a really important facet of the social labs. Applying systems thinking is about recognizing that we can't look at this problem in a void. It does not stand alone. We have to understand how it's interacting with larger systems and account for those larger systems as we're designing solutions. And then the last piece is around prototyping. And that was what was really different for me. So a lot of times you get a grant to do a project, get the go-ahead to work on something. You're going to plan and plan and plan and make sure you get it absolutely right. And then you're going to launch it and you're going to see how it goes. And at that point, you've been planning for so long that you're deeply invested in this pilot. With this approach, you're going to launch your product, your pilot, your project, whatever, much, much earlier to see if it actually works. You're going to test out if your approach to the problem and your proposed solution is actually going to have the effect you want, and you're going to do that much, much earlier. And the idea is that if your prototype doesn't create value on the ground immediately for the people you're trying to help, then you kill it or you evolve it so that it does the work that it's supposed to do. One of the really powerful things that was said to me months ago about the notion of prototyping is that prototyping is about creating value for the people who are living the problem. And in piloting, the people who really benefit from piloting are folks like me who are trying to learn about the problem, who are designing work plans around it. So it's about creating value on the ground for those people quite immediately. So that's labs. A lot of it probably feels very familiar. You're probably looking at this and being like, well, of course, why wouldn't you work this way? But doing a lab process forces you to be really disciplined and rigorous in working this way, forces you to surface all the assumptions that you're making, and it forces you to constantly go back and question, like, is this still the problem? Did we still get this right? Is this still where we should be intervening? It just forces you to get really, really explicit about that. And so in our project, we ended up tackling women in leadership. And it was a really emotionally painful process a lot of the time. It's a very different way of working, and you kind of have to constantly come up against realizing that you've worked in a certain way this whole time and not realized it, and getting really honest with yourself about the ways you've worked and the ways that you've developed solutions, and that you might need to try something else. I can feel I'm getting like a little bit in the weeds on that, but if you wanted to talk to anyone about it, I'm sure that Nellie or Amanda could talk to you about like how hard this work is to just kind of accept sometimes living in ambiguities. So we've looked at women's leadership, and we were looking at women in the tech sector for a while, and then decided, you know what, that's actually not where we want to focus, and then switch back to women in the workforce in general, which is a really good example, I think, of how you have to constantly go back and evaluate, are we still focused in the right place? Is our intervention still the right intervention for this time and place in New Brunswick in particular? So that, very briefly, is the messy, messy work we did of labs. If anyone is interested in talking about them more, myself, I'm sure Nellie or Amanda would be happy to do that as well. Very different way of working, really, really exciting. This is something that I want to keep working with because it just makes so much sense and gave us a lot of tools that I know will be useful, even if we're not doing a full-on lab, just approaching issues and thinking really systematically about them. So that's social labs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Beth. And I think it's a really, the labs are an exciting model for how we work together. And I think, as you pointed out at the end of your presentation, it's the lab is a specific model, but I think there are also lessons in terms of our approaches to collaboration that we can take from there, and really, you know, challenging ourselves to think about broadening our perspectives, and particularly important if we want to get to solutions-based kind of thinking. So thank you for that. I'm going to do just a quick check-in on time, because I know we really want to make sure that people have the opportunity to participate. So are we okay for time, or? Yep, parfait. Okay, thank you. So what I wanted to do now was start to zero in a little bit. I think, you know, earlier on I talked about, you know, the fact that there are a number of initiatives going on within government, and that we, you know, there will be the family plan. But when thinking about kind of economic opportunity, One of the, and this had come back from sort of what we heard from the Woodstock session. There was a lot of focus on the workplace as an area where a lot can be done with respect to advancing women's equality. So I wanted to kind of bring us back to that and talk about that a little bit. And why does it matter in terms of the workplace? So I'm going to share just a little bit of stats, and I stole them from Catalyst Canada. They had provided us with a presentation a while back, and they said, yes, certainly be free to share this information. And it's really just to kind of bring us to a level place, because I know there's lots of knowledge in the room, but about why this matters. So there's lots of data out there, lots of research. One particular source is the IMF, International Monetary Fund, and they suggest that in the next 5 years, the global incomes of women will grow from $13 trillion US to $18 trillion US. By 2028, women will control close to 75% of discretionary spending worldwide, and this figure already applies in North America. And that's the reason why women have been called the fastest growing economic force in the world. It's also been well documented that greater gender diversity at the organizational and team levels makes good business sense. So it's more than just the right or fair thing to do. And I've had conversations with a couple of folks over the last week about that we know it's the right thing to do. And I often find myself conflicted when I'm making the business case for it, because beyond that, it's a social justice issue. It is the right thing to do. But it is interesting to note that it does make good economic sense and good business sense. The research that Catalyst has done, as well as many other organizations like the IMF, has found that having this diverse and inclusive organization, it really yields tangible benefits. And so some of these are listed here: improved financial performance, improved ability to access and leverage talent fully, enhanced corporate reputation and better reflection of the marketplace that you represent, increased innovation, and improved team performance. So all of these things have been documented as benefits to organizations and to their bottom lines. So this, again, shows more data around the improvements to bottom line of gender diverse organizations. Since 2004, it's been demonstrated that companies with greater diversity in their management teams and on their corporate boards achieve better financial results on average than other companies. And we can see here the group of companies with the highest representation of women corporate officers experience better financial performance than the group of companies with the lowest. In 2010, McKinsey had analyzed companies from Europe, Brazil, India, and that all demonstrated similar results. In that case, companies with the highest number of women in their senior management teams outperformed those with no women by 41%. And the story is very similar for women's representation on corporate boards. And as Minister Rogers there indicated, that's an area certainly with respect to the public sector and agencies, boards, and commissions that government appoints. There's been a lot of focus over the last few years. And globally, they say that 30% is kind of that magic number of being able to create influence. So if you have 30% and above of those of women represented on your boards, that's when you start to see that influence in terms of the decision making. And within GNB, in terms of the government appointments, we've exceeded that mark now. The work that was done, the research that Catalyst shared also found that gender diverse boards of directors impact the future of women in senior leadership. So if you have that diversity on your board, that tends to correlate to increased opportunities in leadership positions for women within those organizations. Specifically, they found a positive correlation between the percentage of women board directors in the past and the percentage of women corporate officers in the future. So it really has that snowball effect. In addition, women board directors appeared to have a greater effect on increasing the percentage of line positions held by women than they did on staff positions. So that line experience is a pathway to the C-suite often, and the Catalyst data shows that as well. And that's an area where we know that women are still underrepresented. So the bottom line is that diverse organizations outperform those that are not, and truly inclusive organizations enjoy even more benefits at the organizational, team, and individual levels. So it really is a win-win-win. So again, just you know, where the inclusion, having a truly inclusive organization leads to the benefits. When you have a truly inclusive organization, it's one where you're enhancing and reinforcing organizational commitment, the perception of fairness, and relationships between managers and colleagues. So that, in turn, translates to the benefits to employers, which include the increases in productivity and engagement, improved ability to innovate, greater team citizenship, reduced costs in terms of absenteeism and turnover, and enhanced organizational reputation and improved ability to attract top talent as an employer of choice. So the evidence is quite clear on the benefits of gender diverse organizations. And we know that there are great practices happening within many New Brunswick organizations as well. But we still do have more to do. Oops, sorry, there we go. So there's more to do in terms of increasing opportunities for women and seeing greater diversity in our workforce and organizations across all levels of work. So, you know, we know there are those good pockets of best practices that are happening, but where are the areas that we need to stretch, that we need to grow so that we can really make the gains and the improvements that we need to? And really, when you think about that from an organizational or a business perspective, it's no different than any other aspect of business improvement that you're seeking to achieve. You have to start with analyzing your current state. You know, you need to do that assessment, and then you need to set your goals, and then follow through with the implementation of the plan. So in this case, when we're talking about diverse organizations or increasing the diversity, you need to do that analysis of your current state using a gendered perspective. You know, what does your organization look like now? And there are lots of tools out there that can help you do that. There are some on our website at the Women's Equality Branch. We have staff that are knowledgeable in a number of these areas that we're happy to work with you. And so there's lots of resources that are available to do that work. But when you really think about that, once you've done your assessment and where you need to improve, we know that when it comes to gender diversity, there are kind of 4 buckets or 4 key areas that really make a difference to an organization. So one is as basic as your workforce composition. So you may want to look at your recruitment strategies. You know, you want to look at, okay, what are your numbers like right now in terms of your diversity? And if you're not where you want to be, then what are your recruitment strategies? Think about that. The other piece is, in terms of attracting, is what kind of compensation practices do you have? How do you compensate your employees? Have you done a pay equity analysis within your organization? And here again, there are tools that exist to assist you in that kind of work. The other piece is around talent management. So how do you identify your leaders within your organization? How do you support them? How do you promote them? What kind of mentorship do you offer? What kind of sponsorship do you offer? And I think there's that real key importance between mentorship and sponsorship, which mentorship is kind of more that kind of coaching, which is important, but sponsorship is really acting on behalf of that individual. So if there's a woman in your organization that is really a star and a talented person, it's advocating for that person as well. So sponsorship goes a step beyond just the mentorship and the coaching that you might provide. And then you need to think about the culture of your workplace too. Is there a culture there that really allows for people of diverse backgrounds, for women, for men, to really perform within your organization? What kind of leave policies do you have in place? Do you have childcare available? What kind of response do you offer to violence in the workplace or to people that are experiencing violence and that are showing up at work? That has an impact. And so some of the tools that are at your tables actually speak in a little bit more detail about some of those issues. And as Minister Rogers had mentioned as well, one of the other important tools in terms of gender diversity that was recently published by the Atlantic ministers responsible for status of women is a guide to gender diversity in the workplace. And it really walks through in a step-by-step fashion. And each organization can look through and see what areas they need to work on. So it's not sort of a cookie cutter approach. It's a bit of helps with that analysis of your own organization, but it gives you some of the key questions you might want to ask in terms of where's the work that you need to do. So I think I'll stop there. Those are kind of the key areas that I think globally are recognized as the key areas that can really make a difference in terms of improving the diversity in organizations. And I think what we'd like to do is kind of have that conversation with you over the next while within the course of the day. And so I'm going to turn it over, I guess, to Pascal and go from there. And I guess, I don't know if there are questions, but if we have time for that. But. Okay. Oh.
Hi, thank you, Jocelyn. I hadn't heard about the guide that had been created, and I'm just wondering if there's any outreach that will happen. I'm thinking about, if you were to identify top companies in New Brunswick, to even book a half-hour meeting with senior leaders in HR to actually walk them through that, because it may not necessarily be on people's radar.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point. The New Brunswick actually, our Minister for Women's Equality, who happens to be the Premier as well, Premier Galland, hosted the Atlantic ministers in February, and that's when the guide was released. So it has been very recent. It's certainly available on our website, and there was a news release that talked about it, but you're right. I mean, I think if we can do kind of more of that outreach, so that's a great idea, and we'll certainly think about how to make those connections and make that guide more widely available. Yeah.
On va prendre une pause d'à peu près 3 minutes. But before you go, when you come back to your tables, we're going to have conversation. And like Beth said, we need to have diverse groups to have meaningful conversation that can bring, new ideas, des nouvelles idées, des nouvelles approches. Donc, quand vous allez revenir à vos tables dans 3 minutes, puis je sais que c'est très court, on va vous demander de vous faire des nouveaux amis. Pas nécessairement vous asseoir avec les gens de votre organisation, d'essayer d'avoir une diversité autour des tables pour la conversation suivante. Donc, 3 à 4 minutes de pause, puis on se retrouve pour vous donner la parole. Merci.
Bonjour tout le monde. Hello everybody. As mentioned, Monique Leblanc, députée de Moncton Est, qui est un petit peu plus à l'est d'ici. Et puis, j'ai entendu que vous avez fait du beau travail ce matin. Malheureusement, je n'ai pas pu participer à toute la session, mais j'aime bien venir pour le synopsis à la fin pour avoir... Alors, c'est un grand plaisir pour moi de vous présenter notre Premier ministre dans le cadre de ce sommet d'opportunités sur l'égalité des hommes et des femmes. Mais je suis surtout fière de faire partie d'un gouvernement qui a en tête une personne qui reconnaît l'importance de l'égalité des femmes et des hommes ici dans la province. Non seulement c'est un dossier qu'il connaît bien et sur lequel il a agi très rapidement. Peu de temps après avoir été élu en 2014, les premières annonces qui ont été faites par le Premier ministre, ça a été la modification sur la loi à l'avortement, la modification à la loi redonnant l'autonomie au Conseil des femmes du Nouveau-Brunswick et de faire en sorte qu'on nomme sur les conseils et les comités de la province un montant équitable ou égal de femmes. Alors, je pense qu'on peut l'appeler, moi je pense qu'il est un féministe, je ne suis pas certaine, comme Justin Trudeau se dit féministe. Ben moi, en tout cas, je considère que notre premier ministre est féministe. Et puis, donc, pour cette raison, ça me donne encore plus de fierté de demander à M. Brian Gallant, le premier ministre du Nouveau-Brunswick, de venir nous prendre la parole.
Merci beaucoup. Bien, merci beaucoup tout le monde pour votre présence ici aujourd'hui. Je ne m'en doutais pas que ça allait être une discussion très bien et je pense que nous avons vu plusieurs perspectives et je pense que c'est en raison des participants et participantes qui sont ici. Alors, merci beaucoup pour le temps que vous consacrez à nous pour cette discussion très importante. Aussi, merci pour ce que vous faites jour après jour. Vous êtes des personnes qui sont très engagées, vous êtes des personnes qui travaillent très fort pour essayer d'améliorer le sort de la province. Alors, le fait que vous venez ici, ça démontre ça, mais aussi tout ce que vous faites jour après jour, semaine après semaine est apprécié pour avancer notre province. I want to start off just by acknowledging somebody I'm sure that would normally be here that we have recently lost, Wendy Robbins, who I think is no stranger to anybody in this room. Just an incredible New Brunswicker, passionate, and of course, a fierce advocate for women's equality. So I never know what to do in these cases, but in this case, I think she would be pleased and be smiling if we give her a round of applause, if you don't mind. Ces sommets sont vraiment appréciés. These summits are very helpful for us. We did 22 of them in our first round, and they gave us really good ideas, very specific ideas at times. They gave us good suggestions, but almost every single time, we just left those summits with a better sense of what's happening. We have a better sense of what are the main concerns, what are the challenges ahead, and what are the opportunities. So the summits have been great, and this round has been great again. So I think we're at number 7, if I'm not mistaken, which is every single one of them has been helpful in their own way, and this one is certainly no different. I've been numerous times at consultations and roundtables in my sort of previous lives, and I can tell you that I always ask myself, is it worth anything? Do they actually really listen? Are we just doing this and it's sort of us running around in circles and it's not going to go anywhere? I can tell you it helps. It really does. And hopefully you've seen that there have been actions that have been taken directly from many of your comments in the past. And I can tell you that many of your comments today will help inform and influence things that we're able to do moving forward. Alors, je vous apprécie énormément et merci pour encore une fois le temps que vous avez consacré pour ce sommet qui va nous aider. I guess a couple things too that I just want to mention. I just want to comment on your comments, but I just want to mention this. We try to strike this in every summit. I think we certainly got it in this one. The idea that we're discussing one specific subject often influences people when they do consultations to just have people that are directly involved in that subject. And I think when I had the chance to go and say hello to everybody around the tables, it is pretty evident that we have people from different sectors here, and I think that's great. And I think that's what's needed if we're going to advance some of these things. A lot of these subjects are very complex. They require collaboration, as many of you mentioned. They require a bunch of people in the same canoe, all paddling in the same direction. So the fact that there are different perspectives here really is appreciated. So give yourselves a round of applause for the dialogue today. Et avant d'aller plus loin, je veux aussi juste remercier tous les employés qui sont ici avec nous, des personnes qui travaillent très fort, évidemment, pour l'égalité des femmes, mais aussi qui travaillent juste pour améliorer la province. Alors, s'il vous plaît, une main d'applaudissement pour les employés qui nous ont joints. So on to some of the substantive comments and recommendations that I'd like to comment on. So if I didn't comment on something, I think I'm going to touch pretty much everything, but if I don't feel like we're not taking note of that, I certainly listen to everything, and I can tell you Susan is going to go through what the feedback loop will look like, and you'll see that certainly we're going to do everything we can to make sure we captured all the thoughts here today. So just a couple of quick things. First off, for us, one thing that is very important within government and within our society is to have women's perspective represented. For the obvious, very, very mathematical reason of the fact that they represent actually more than 50% of the population. But second, obviously, it's the right thing to do. And third, it also helps us govern better. Studies show that the way that women govern businesses, govern NGOs, govern government is there's exceptions, but overall a bit more focused on consensus building, a bit more focused on collaboration and respectful dialogue. So it's good for all of us to make sure that there's a women's perspective in everything we do. So we're trying to do that and trying to encourage that across society. So a couple things that we did, just a couple notes on that. The gender-based analysis is something that we have instituted, as you may know, so that allows us to make sure that we, when making decisions at the cabinet table, always consider what impact this could have on genders. We also, as you may know, as Monique just said, we restored not only the Women's Council's independence, but also funding for the Women's Council. So we think that that's a very important tool and mechanism and a group of individuals that are bringing a women's perspective to our society here in New Brunswick. And I'm the minister responsible for women's equality. And some of you have heard me say this before, but I did that for a few reasons. But one of them is just because we have 4 women in our caucus, which is not enough, and I'll get into that in a second. So 3 of which are in cabinet. So in order to get more of a women's perspective on more portfolios, I said to myself, I'm going to make myself minister responsible for women's equality. That allows the other ministers that are the ministers that are women to focus on other portfolios. And then I, as premier, am going to be pulled back every time and every now and again to make sure that I'm considering that point of view. So that's one way that we're at least implicitly trying to make sure that we have a women's perspective in the decisions that we're making as your government. A couple other quick things, and a lot of this was mentioned, so I'm going to go sort of a little bit to what we're doing, to what you said. When it comes to domestic violence, intimate partner violence, as you may have seen, we're passing legislation that will help on that regards. It unfortunately only helps on the how do we deal with it. We have to also work as a society to end it, but this is a way to deal with those very unfortunate situations. If I'm to sum it up, it's always dangerous to sum things up maybe, but I'll do my best. It essentially is a law that will give interim measures in a more expedient way to allow somebody that's in a situation of domestic violence to be able to come forward to be able to come forward in a more comfortable manner, and to also be able to get things such as interim orders for things such as having the possession of the home, having possession of other certain assets, having custody of the children. These would just be interim measures because we have to obviously balance out the accusation versus findings. But this is a way for somebody to feel more comfortable to be able to come forward, as I'm sure many of you in this room would know because of the work that you do better than I, that's a real barrier. So we're hopeful that will help. Also, we're investing in affordable housing, which will include a component of investing in transition homes as well for women and for children that find themselves in these terrible situations. We also, as you may know, have been working very hard on reproductive health for women, but for all genders, whether it's the gender-confirming surgeries that we're covering, whether it's midwives, whether it's reproductive choice. We, as you may have seen, had eliminated something that should have been eliminated a few decades ago. And I'd like to think that with the recent announcement, we're actually leading the countries in some way, which I think is not only, again, the right thing to do, but it's something we have to do to respect the rights of women in this province. We're also working, as you may know, on pay equity. We've committed to over $30 million to help over 3,000 people achieve pay equity in the province. We're working as well to make sure that we, as a public sector, will have pay equity implemented. There was a law that was passed a while back, as you may know, and we're going up and cleaning up to make sure that everything that's supposed to be followed there is being followed. De plus, on travaille avec les employeurs de 50 ans. On va travailler avec les employeurs de 50 employés ou plus pour les encourager fortement à commencer à avoir des plans pour l'équité salariale dans la province. Nous travaillons aussi à avoir plus de femmes dans des positions d'influence. We want women at the decision-making table. So as Monique mentioned, there's a few things we're doing there. We made a commitment of having 50% and hopefully more of our appointments as a cabinet go to women in the province. Up to now, we've achieved that mark, which is great. And I have to tell you that at first it was hard. It was actually pretty hard because there was a bit of a culture that we had to change around this process. But now I can tell you that the cabinet ministers themselves is one of the first things everybody checks now when there are appointments that are going to be made to make sure that we're hitting that mark. One thing, and I've said this to a few of you already, but I think it's important to repeat. One thing that has sort of, it's a pet peeve of mine, is I will get people that will come up to me, including women, that will say, well, I don't understand why we're doing that. Like, we don't need quotas. Like, a woman should be appointed because they're not because they're a woman, but because they're right for the job. At no point are we advocating appointing a woman or a man that's not capable of doing the job. It's as simple as other types of considerations that we've already included in our appointment processes. People, when they look at a cabinet that's appointed, when they look at other types of appointments, they're going to look at the regional representation. They're going to look at the linguistic representation. Some will look at if there are different ages represented. So there are considerations we have already accepted as no-brainers when it comes to trying to make these appointments. So having 50%, if not more, of our appointments go to women, I think, is another consideration that makes a lot of sense. The other aspect to that is that it's not that I have, as a government, we have one appointment to make and it has to be a woman, and then you go and find, and maybe they're competent, maybe not. That's not what's happening. In the overall aggregate of appointments, hundreds of appointments that we make, you can't tell me that if we make an effort, it can't be 50% women and that they're all qualified, and hopefully the 50% men are very qualified as well for their jobs. So if you can help me spread that, because that's a pet peeve of mine whenever I hear that argument, when I have the chance to explain it to somebody and take the 10 minutes, which I don't always have, I usually get about 10 seconds on CTV. If you can help me, I would appreciate that, because I think that that's something that we have to put into our culture as a province. Couple other things too, and we are also trying to not just make appointments to traditional industries for women as well. We're trying to mix that up and trying to have women appointed to things that would maybe be a little in the non-traditional sense. We've made appointment for trade representation. That's a woman, which would be great. NB Liquor, we have a chair of the board that's a woman, which is great. And we're going to continue to try to have some of these appointments that are more visible and at times maybe non-traditional industries for women. And in fact, this week, There'll be another announcement in terms of appointments, and stay tuned, because I think anybody that would care about women's equality and having as many women represented as possible in all spheres of our society will be pleased. So stay tuned for that. A little teaser, so hopefully you're interested. Also, when it comes to appointments, I don't want to bore you, but I have a bunch of things I want to say here. I hope that's okay. So when it comes to appointments, I've had the chance to appoint 2 clerks of the Privy Council, so 2 clerks of the government, the highest order, and both of which were women. And Judy Wagner, who I'm sure many of you have met, is doing a phenomenal job. So it's great to have her doing the work that she's doing. And also, when it comes to positions of influence, we need more people. We need more women elected to public office. So whether it's councillors, whether it's to the DECs, whether it's to the health authorities, whether it's to the legislature or to Parliament, we need more women. Nobody's going to convince me that there's not something wrong with the process when it comes to women getting elected in New Brunswick if the legislature has never had more than 20% of its seats filled by women. So there are clearly challenges. There are clearly issues. I think it's very complex. I think there are a lot of things that play into it, but we're going to try to do a lot better and a lot more to get more women involved and get more women that are elected. And on that, just a couple quick things. We, as you may know, have changed the schedule for the legislature in hopes to have less sittings at night. There are some, and when there are some, we have requirements for less people, which is good. I think it makes it more family friendly. And by the way, not just for women, for men as well, which is great. And as well, you may have heard of the 1.5 value to vote for a women candidate. I want to explain that for 2 seconds. Many thought that when we put out that legislation that it was actually giving a vote for a woman 1.5 times more weight. So that's not what it is, which would be pretty incredible. It's the envelope of money that is given to political parties after an election. So there's a pool of money, and how they decide who gets what is by the amount of votes each party got. So they divide the percentage of votes of that pool of money, and that's how you basically decide to fund political parties. So all political parties would get a percentage of their vote. So what we did is we changed the formula so that a vote for a woman candidate will be worth 1.5 points, if you will, and a vote for a man candidate, a male candidate, would be worth 1 point. So what it is, because some of you will say, well, I don't really get it. If it's after the election, how does it help? What it does, in our opinion, or what we hope it will do, is it will be a clear incentive, a monetary one at that, for political parties to recruit more women to be candidates, right? Because at the end of the day, you need money to fuel campaigns, and that's the case for all political parties. So if you can get more money because you had more women candidates, that will be a clear incentive to hopefully change behavior and the culture within all the political parties to have more women that are recruited, more efforts going into recruiting them, more women that ultimately get nominated and hopefully ultimately get elected. Other couple quick things. I just want to make a couple quick comments on le réseautage que vous avez dit. Je ne sais pas quelle table qui avait mentionné ça, mais le fait que souvent c'est le hockey, puis le golf, puis tout ça. C'est drôle parce que je vais vous dire que j'ai passé faire la même chose. J'ai passé faire la même erreur et je m'ai corrigé. J'ai rien que su comme une semaine après. Because we actually had a fundraiser from Opportunities New Brunswick organized, which was great within government, which was a lot of fun, and it was for hockey. And I was all excited because I haven't played hockey in a long time, so it was an excuse for me to lace up my skates. So anyways, I said yes, and I was all very excited. And then I told myself, that is one of those things that's going to be more men, because predominantly there are more men that play hockey. So just by virtue of the percentages, it'll be more men at that activity. So I requested a paint night with government employees to offset that. For 2 reasons. One, because I obviously want to make my words count here and make it influence my actions, because I completely agree with your point. And number 2, because I went to a paint night with my fiancée Karin. I was really bad at it, so I want to practice, and hopefully next time I'll do a bit better when I go with her. So I just wanted to make a quick comment there, because sometimes even people that understand and believe exactly what you said to be true forget. So we need to be reminded at times, and I was glad I caught that one. Also, when it comes to domestic violence, when it comes to violence, des très bons points ont été faits lorsque ça vient aux employeurs et les politiques des employeurs. C'était intéressant. Moi, j'en ai parlé avec des employeurs. Je peux vous dire, eux autres aimeraient d'avoir ça. Eux autres, ils aimeraient beaucoup avoir de la formation, des idées, des suggestions sur comment s'y prendre pour aider ces personnes. So a lot of employers that I spoke to actually would love to have these sort of best practices, have policy best practices when it comes to some of their employees that may be going through terrible domestic and intimate partner violence situations. So I think there's a real appetite for that in the private sector, and with your help, we would certainly love to move that forward. As well, the yes and no, the sort of the idea of raising awareness and educating our youth, and I mean just people in general when it comes to yes, what's yes and what's no. I just wanted to say, because you would think that it shows how people are a lot more creative than I, because you would think that would be a very difficult conversation to have. It doesn't mean we shouldn't have it, but it would be very difficult. However, I don't know if you ever saw this video, the cup of tea, or is the cup of coffee, or what? Yeah, was it tea? Yeah, did you ever see that video? So if they can make it, satirical like that and make it funny and make it very easy to understand, I think there's real things to do. So I watched that video like 5 times. I thought it was great and very creative and very smart and going right to the point of how to raise awareness on that. So I thought that was great. Des mentors, faire une genre d'analyse de c'est quoi nos atouts, c'est quoi les choses qui seraient peut-être en pénurie. Je pense que c'est des très bons points. La collaboration des associations, les universités, les collèges, le secteur privé, les différents paliers gouvernementaux, je pense que c'est des très bons points. A youth employment fund type program for women in non-traditional industries, very interesting as well. And on that, I just want to say that it's a very good point, and we'll take that back, but we are trying to do some other things too. We have a cyber NB that's working on teaching cyber skills to women. We have IT and coding opportunities that we're trying to get more women into IT. Unfortunately, predominantly an industry with predominantly men, and it's an industry where we're going to have some gaps in the future. So the more women we can get interested in that, the better for the economy as a whole as well. And same thing with trade. So we're obviously trying to get more women interested in trades, and there's some wonderful programs getting young women across the province engaged in that. Les formations pour des personnes pour mieux comprendre, non seulement c'est un très bon point, non seulement qu'on veut qu'elles soient capables de se faire nominer, mais une fois nominés, d'être capables de faire l'emploi. Alors ça, c'est important. And it's a very good point, and I just want to raise that going back to my other thing. I mean, going back to my pet peeve, it's very important that we appoint people and nominate people that are qualified. Because one of the worst things we can do is actually appoint somebody, a woman, to a position. They can't do it because we as people would fear that we would appoint them only because they're a woman, and then all of a sudden it has this perpetual impact of saying, oh, well, look, they weren't able to do it in that industry or whatever. So it's crucial that we find the right people, the right women to be able to be appointed to these things so they do a good job, and then that hopefully starts to change the culture across the province. Alors ça, c'est très bien. The only thing I would also add on the ABCs, so I think the idea of having training to make sure that they're able to do that well is a good point. Also, I just want to raise that the more women we have that are interested in expressing an interest, the better. Because, again, we'll have different types of skill sets that we're looking for, different types of agencies, boards, and commissions. So yourselves, if you haven't appointed, any women and men as well, but any men or women in this room, please appoint yourselves or nominate friends that you think would be very good or qualified for some of these positions. Just let's see if I have anything else. Leverage unions, I thought was a great point. Again, going back to the collaboration. A couple quick points that I would make that I'm not sure if they were raised or not, but I just want to flag them. We also see that for having more women able to access the workforce, daycare is crucial as well. So we've just made an announcement earlier this morning. We're investing $1 million to help create more daycare spaces in rural New Brunswick, aussi pour des personnes qui ont peut-être besoin de plus longues heures lorsque ça vient à les garderies, et pour aider les minorités linguistiques autour de la province. And since we've been your government, we've created 2,300 extra daycare spaces in the province, and we're very pleased to be doubling the daycare assistance budget on January 1st, 2018, very directly making daycare more accessible and affordable in the province. So I think one last thing, I underlined it here, and it goes back to my pet peeve. I've only talked about that 4 times already. I do want to tell you an experience that I have, and this is maybe for you as individuals, but also for you to help change the culture and to try to get more women in non-traditional industries when it comes to appointments, especially getting more women appointed, and again, hopefully appointed to non-traditional aspects. It's anecdotal, but I think all of you would agree with this. So it's anecdotal, but I'll tell you that there are some boards and there are some commissions and some appointments that we made where I just know that people are lobbying hard for it. They often don't come and tell me, but you can sense around that people are, pushing some names, or some people would think they'd be interested, and it's always men. It's always men, and I rarely heard somebody lobbying somebody to be a part of some organization, and it's a woman that's being pushed. And I don't know why that is, but it's anecdotal. But again, it's one of the problems, one of the challenges that's perpetuating some of the unfortunate things that we may see. So on that, I'm not advocating everybody start to lobby everyone, but we got to do everything we can to make sure there are more people that are applying, more people that are raising their hands, more people that are doing anything that anybody else would be trying to do to try to get the job, and obviously within the rules and within the appropriate etiquette. But I think that's important. You still have our commitment to do everything we can to make sure that we're over 50% though when it comes to appointments. So with that said, I just want to thank all of you again for all of your time. Thank you again for what you do day in and day out to advance women's equality, and many of you that advance the province in many different ways through your involvement. Je vous remercie énormément. On espère que ceci, ça sera juste une continuation de la conversation. Il y a bien des défis et bien des opportunités qu'il faut saisir, mais ensemble, j'ai aucun doute qu'on va être capable d'avancer l'égalité des femmes, on va être capable d'avancer l'économie du Nouveau-Brunswick. Thank you so much. Merci beaucoup.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur le Premier ministre. Pour moi, c'est tellement clair, puis c'est vraiment, vraiment apprécié votre passion puis votre sincérité pour ce sujet, puis ce dossier. Ça, c'est une des raisons pourquoi je travaille avec ce gouvernement. Alors, merci beaucoup. What I'm going to talk to you about are next steps really quickly, what you can expect from here going forward. So the first thing you can expect is an email momentarily, sometime in the next probably 24 hours, asking for your feedback. So we have a link to a survey with 9 questions. The questions are somewhat logistical, so how was the room, the timing, the agenda, but also topical. So which of the things that we talked about today is your top priority? Which of the things that we talked about do you want to collaborate on going forward? So that'll help us direct the effort from here based on what you tell us is most important to you. And we add that to all of the information that you put on your sheets. On va aussi avoir des données ouvertes. Alors, on va prendre toute cette information, ça va aller dans un spreadsheet Excel, puis on va mettre sur notre site web pour que les chercheurs sociaux peuvent garder toute cette information de 7 sommets, de les 7 sommets qu'on avait eu déjà, puis les 8 ou 9 sommets qu'on va avoir. So that creates a body of open data that researchers can dig into. It will be non-identified, so it won't say who said what. There won't be names. It'll just be tables of question 1, data set 1, report back 2, data set 2, with some collective information about the number of participants and that kind of thing. And we don't know what will come of that, but that's part of our commitment to open government and open data, is to make that available to see what learnings might come. We will be posting the videos that come from this summit, so if you want to rewatch or see snippets, then that will be available, and you can find a good discussion on the Facebook page and on the Twitter hashtag with different people's views and the snippets that were most notable to them. And then there's going to be the report. So the report will be more of the narrative. So that will say, okay, here's who gathered, here was the presentation by the department, here were the key issues identified, here's what came out of the first report back, here were the things that we dug into in the afternoon, here were the things that you just told us. So that will be the more fulsome summary of all of the ideas and next steps that were shared today. And then that will inform very much the next round of work. I hope, it's my hope, that it informs some of the work that you're about to undertake in your organizations, and it will certainly inform the work that the Women's Equality Branch and the Executive Council Office and the Jobs Board Secretariat are going to undertake, so that when we next gather, and I'll say under this format, when we gather in maybe in a year's time, we'll be actively talking about these new things that we've done together and how far they've come and where we go next. So that's the idea. You can watch for that report in a number of weeks. As you can imagine, the team who's writing those reports are also hosting 18 summits, so they're going to fit it all in. So please watch for that. We'd love your input into the survey. If you have a use for the open data, please share it, share the video, and then give us input on the report. We're contemplating, as we share that report, possibly in draft format, you can help collaborate with us on the final format so that we do make sure that the content of the report itself reflects your direct experience here. So that's what we want. My final responsibilities are a few thank yous. So premièrement à l'Université de Moncton pour cette salle, pour la nourriture, pour une bonne facilité pour nos discussions aujourd'hui. Merci à l'équipe. Je ne suis pas sûre s'ils sont ici aux chambres, mais UDM have been great hosts for us. I want to thank my colleagues, so Lise, the Uber organizer, and Pascal and Jason, our facilitators, and the team looking after the media and the social. I very much want to thank the Women's Equality Branch, so the team of Martine and Nicole and Jocelyn and the team sort of behind the scenes that I'm probably not even aware of. They get me knocking on their door saying, oh, we have to hold another summit, and they say, another one? Because they have done multiple more summits than most of the departments I work with, but yet they produce fantastic information, summaries of work, a phenomenal amount of work that just happens because that's what their department does to advance things like these guides and the legislation and the programs. So I very much appreciate Jocelyn and what you and the team did to support this summit. Thank you very much. And finally, most importantly, I want to thank everyone in the room today because you have just given us what I think is most precious, 5 heures de vos temps pour partager vos idées, vos pensées, vos expériences. C'est invaluable. It's invaluable for us to have your time and your words and your energy. It's the best thing you could give us. So I very, very much appreciate that you took this day to come and participate in this discussion with government. I hope you found it valuable. I know I did personally. So with that, I want to say thank you and bonne journée. Merci beaucoup.